The world focused on expensive technology. One Filipino scientist quietly noticed a pattern no one else saw and predicted a global trend years before it happened. You won't believe how he did it. In the bustling heart of Manila, amidst the hum of traffic and the glow of neon signs, a young scientist named Dr. Emilio Santos worked tirelessly in his modest, cluttered lab. Unlike many of his peers who chased fame or high-profile projects, Emilio was drawn to patterns that seemed invisible to everyone else. Tiny shifts in technology, subtle changes in human behavior, and global trends that hinted at something bigger than what textbooks described. His colleagues often teased him, calling him a dreamer or lost in thought, but he paid little attention. For Emilio, every anomaly was a clue, every failure a lesson, and every quiet observation a potential breakthrough. One particularly warm evening, with the city lights flickering outside his window and the hum of distant jeepneys in the streets below, Emilio pored over years of data on renewable energy. That's when he noticed a subtle but profound shift. The world was slowly moving toward micro-energy innovations, small, efficient, and practical solutions that could transform the way communities lived. The global spotlight, however, remained fixed on massive, costly energy projects. It was clear to Emilio that the future belonged to smart, accessible solutions, ones that ordinary people could use to improve their daily lives. Motivated, he began experimenting tirelessly. Using simple, locally sourced materials, Emilio created prototype after prototype. Some failed spectacularly, while others seemed almost too simple to work. Yet each small failure brought him closer to a design that was not only practical but revolutionary in its approach. His friends and family often asked why he dedicated so many late nights to what seemed like small projects. Emilio simply smiled, confident that the world would eventually understand. To him, real innovation didn't need glamour, it needed heart, creativity, and persistence. Little did anyone know these humble experiments in a small Manila lab would one day predict a global trend, reshaping industries and earning international recognition for Filipino ingenuity. The seeds of a revolution were quietly being planted, long before anyone else could see it coming. The weeks turned into months. Inside his small lab, Emilio Santos, the young Filipino scientist in his mid-20s, kept perfecting his prototypes, small, efficient energy modules that could store power at a fraction of the cost. He didn't have fancy machines or corporate sponsors. He had imagination, persistence, and the Filipino spirit, the kind that builds something out of almost nothing. One night, while uploading his test results online, Emilio shared his findings on a global science forum. He didn't expect anyone to notice, but within hours his post began to spread. Comments flooded in. Some praised him, many mocked him, and one particular reply caught his eye. A professor from Cambridge University asking for a copy of his data. Emilio thought it was a prank, but a few days later, a real email arrived. Cambridge wanted to review his research. At first, he felt overwhelmed. He didn't even have proper funding. He used borrowed tools, old equipment, and even recycled wires from discarded electronics. Yet his formula, combination of micro-energy feedback loops and local organic compounds, was something global researchers had never considered, because it came from Filipino resourcefulness, not big-budget labs. A week later, his work was published in an online research digest. The title read, "Unidentified researcher from the Philippines suggests new energy model." It wasn't a headline, but it was a spark. Soon, small engineering communities began reaching out to him. A startup in Japan wanted to test his model. A renewable energy firm from Singapore offered to collaborate. Even an American professor wanted to invite him to present his findings. All expenses paid. Emilio could hardly believe it. From his small room in Manila, with tools worth less than $100, he had started a global conversation. Still, not everyone was convinced. Critics called it a lucky guess. Some Western scientists accused him of accidental plagiarism. Others said, how could someone from a developing country make such a prediction? Those words cut deep. But instead of breaking him, they fueled him. Late at night, when the city was asleep, Emilio would stare at his glowing prototype, a small cube of light, humming softly on his desk. It was fragile, imperfect, but alive. He whispered to himself, "Let them doubt. The world will see soon enough." And as if the universe heard him, within months, his energy model began appearing in global research projects, unknowingly proving his theory right. The world was starting to notice. But Emilio had no idea that his real test was yet to come. Night settled over Manila again, and Emilio Santos sat alone in his lab, the soft blue light of his invention breathing gently against the darkness. The noise online had grown louder, articles, debates, reactions, but he ignored them all. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing proof. He tightened a wire, scribbled a note, then whispered to himself, "Just one more test." Outside, the city pulsed with traffic and rain, unaware that inside this small room, a quiet revolution was alive. Then one humid afternoon, he heard a knock. A black car waited outside. Two visitors stepped out, one Filipino official, another a foreign scientist. "Mr. Santos," the man said, "the Department of Science wants to see your work." For a second, Emilio's heart froze. Had he done something wrong? But their tone wasn't sharp. It was curious, almost excited. He nodded, invited them in, and turned on his cube. The little device hummed, glowing brighter than ever before. The lights around the lab flickered, then steadied, powered entirely by his design. The visitors leaned closer, eyes wide. "This could light up villages," whispered the foreigner. Emilio didn't answer. He only smiled faintly, the glow reflecting in his glasses. That night, an email arrived. An invitation from the Global Science Conference in Geneva. They wanted him to speak. For a long moment, he just stared at the screen. A boy from Manila who once built machines from scrap, now called to the biggest stage in the world. He didn't even own a suit. But he carried something more powerful: belief. Weeks later, bright lights blinded him as he stepped onto the stage. The hall was silent, rows of scholars, engineers, and world leaders staring at the young Filipino scientist. He gripped the podium, took a deep breath, and began, "Innovation doesn't only live in rich laboratories. Sometimes it lives in a small room in Manila." The audience stirred. He showed them how his energy loop worked, how it could sustain power with almost no loss, how it could change the lives of those without light. When the lights dimmed and his cube continued to shine, the room erupted into applause, first scattered, then thunderous. A standing ovation for a Filipino name they had just learned to pronounce. Months passed. The world called it the Santos system. Power companies adopted his model. Remote towns lit up for the first time. But Emilio stayed home, training young engineers, building labs for students who reminded him of himself. He didn't chase headlines, he built futures. One night he sat again at that same desk. The cube still glowed softly beside him. He looked at it, smiled, and whispered, "You did it. We did it." The camera slowly pulled away, the small Manila window shining against the dark city skyline. A quiet Filipino genius whose light finally reached the world.